Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar on healthy boundaries and relationships. My name is Claudia. I'm an autism practitioner at Swindon in Gloucestershire Mind. So this webinar was originally delivered as a live session, and this recording has been made available so that anyone who couldn't attend can still access the information. So whether you're watching today or a later date, I'm really glad you're here. Today's session is designed specifically for autistic and other neurodivergent individuals. So we'll be exploring what boundaries are, why they can be challenging, and how you can use them to support your well-being, reduce burnout, and help build more positive and respectful relationships. So although this is a recording and you won't be able to have live discussions, if you do have any questions, feel free to email me. So I've included my email there. Also, I will include some questions at the end that I was asked during the live webinar. Yeah, so some of the topics that we bring up may bring up quite difficult emotions. So if at any time you feel you want to pause the recording, please do so, take a break. You can always return to the session at another time if you need to. So looking after yourself is the priority here. Yeah. So I guess let's get started. So I guess some of these ground rules might be more applicable to the live webinar, but similarly, yeah, be kind and curious if you're emailing any questions. Look after your well-being. Yeah, not recorded, but here's the recording. um, Okay, we also have upcoming workshops. So if you did want to sign up to any of those, there's the link to sign up to that. So the next one is on the 15th of July on employment and reasonable adjustments. Again, I think this is a live webinar, but there will be a recorded version available afterwards. Similarly, energy accounting and burnout, and then masking. If you have any suggestions for topics that you wanted covered in additional webinars, if you could let us know, that would be great as well. So, yeah, a little bit more about the objectives of what to expect from this webinar. So we'll look at identifying what healthy relationships look like, learn what boundaries are, the different types of boundaries and why they matter, consider what happens when boundaries are not respected, identify when boundaries are violated, notice some red flags for manipulation, pressure, or unsafe relationships as well. Yeah. So I guess first question, what are relationships? So oftentimes people think of relationships in terms of romantic relationships, but actually a relationship is a connection between two or more people, shaped by interaction, emotions, and mutual influence. So it doesn't have to be romantic, it could be family relationships, friendships, relationships you have with professionals, any type of relationship in that sense. And then I guess if we think of like the core traits of a healthy relationship, so this is not an exhaustive list. Obviously, there can be a lot more core traits of a healthy relationship. I thought I'd just focus on these for now, just to get like a couple core traits in there. So I guess trust, being that you feel safe to rely on someone and believe that they will be consistent and honest and they'll respect your boundaries, that you feel secure in that relationship, knowing your boundaries will be respected, being able to be yourself without judgment as well. Trust builds over time through actions and not words as well. So someone consistently showing up for you, that's when you build that trust. Communication as well. So the way we share our thoughts, feelings, needs, and boundaries with each other, being able to express yourself and your needs clearly, listening and being heard as well. So important to feel like you can be heard by the other person, asking for clarification when needed, not feeling like you can't ask to get something repeated, things like that. Feeling that you are capable of saying yes or no safely. So it's not that if I say no, I'm going to get the repercussions of my actions. So yeah, this reduces misunderstandings, very important part of healthy relationships. Respect. So this means valuing someone's feelings, needs, boundaries, and individuality as well. Accepting no without that pressure or guilt. So honoring differences in communication or needs as well, not dismissing or minimizing feelings, and treating each other with kindness and consideration. So that's a very important one. And acceptance. So acceptance meaning allowing someone to be themselves without trying to change who they are, being valued for who you are and not who others want you to be, respecting your divergent traits and differences, feeling safe to unmask or be authentic, not needing to do something to belong. So just being yourself is enough in that sense. So yeah, just a couple core traits of relationships there. Obviously, like I said, not an exhaustive list. Could keep going with those traits, but those are the 4 that I focused on here. Okay, so what are boundaries? So boundaries are invisible lines that separate you from others, showing what you are comfortable with and what you will not tolerate emotionally, physically, or mentally. So a couple misconceptions around boundaries. So they are not about controlling others, and they actually help create healthier relationships, because then people understand what you will and won't tolerate. Yeah, and everyone's boundaries are different as well. So what's important to me and what boundaries I have in place may be completely different to someone else. So it's kind of understanding yourself as a person, what's important to you, that's important to be able to then set good boundaries and stick with those boundaries as well. So we will speak about values, and understanding how to set those boundaries through values later. Yeah. And I guess some more information about consequences. So this is not to scare anybody, but some of the consequences of not setting boundaries can lead to feelings of overwhelm or exhaustion. If you're constantly saying yes to plans when actually you don't have the energy for them, you can see how you might become quite overwhelmed and exhausted. It might actually lead to burnout, which is the third point there, because you're not listening to your body and you're constantly increasing demands when actually there are times when actually you should be saying no to plans. Resentment as well. So you might feel resentment towards the other person because you're saying yes to plans that you didn't want to in the first place, just because you want to make someone else happy. And you don't want to feel that resentment, because that's when we start to bottle things up and you could explode in the future. Feeling disconnected from authentic self as well. I think that's a major one. So if we're constantly going with other people's plans, we might lose ourselves and we might not know what we truly want or what we truly like or dislike. So when someone's asked, what would you like to eat? You might be so shocked that someone asked you that you don't even know what kind of food you'd like to eat. So you might try to shift it and be like, oh, I don't mind anything you want to eat. But that comes from that constant going with other people's plans and not really realizing what you would like. Yeah, that can then lead to reduced self-esteem and confidence as well. Difficulty trusting others, I guess, knowing that you are not authentic to yourself. You might feel like other people might be doing the same. So when you're like, oh, let's eat Chinese food, you might be like, are other people feeling resentment towards me? So it's like kind of shifted focus, and you start to think, are other people also doing the same things that I'm doing to them? And that can lead to like one-sided relationships, feeling misunderstood. Yeah, so that's the importance of setting those boundaries. Again, more on why boundaries matter. So the importance for neurodivergent people. So having your needs heard. And understand that your needs are valid, they're not selfish, they're not inconvenient, and the benefits of boundary awareness, understanding that actually you are preventing resentment and burnout and improving relationship health by advocating for your own needs and putting those boundaries into place. So again, remember, boundaries are not controlling others, but about creating healthy, satisfying relationships. Okay. Types of boundaries. So this is not an exhaustive list. Again, there are other boundaries. I thought I'd focus on these 5 just so you can see the different types of relationships and how that might relate to day to day, and whether you resonate with any of these as well. Okay, so physical and sensory boundaries. So pop these together. So I guess physical boundaries is under the umbrella of sensory boundaries. But I thought it's quite useful to just speak about that one separately as well. So physical boundaries, so those are the limits that help us feel safe and comfortable with our bodies, personal space, and physical contact. And sensory boundaries, so those are the limits that help us protect from sensory overwhelm and support our sensory needs. So a couple examples of sample scripts here. So we will speak about scripts in more detail on in a couple slides time. These are just a couple sample ones. So it might be the case that you have a couple scripts when you're first putting boundaries into place. Having a couple scripts is quite useful because then you can use them in multiple different scenarios. So if you learn a couple, let's say one script per type of boundary, that way you can use it and not feel paralyzed and say yes when you really wanted to say no in the situation. And then when you feel more comfortable, you might reduce the use of scripts. Yeah, so things like I don't want hugs right now, a wave works better for me. Loud noise is painful for me, please turn it down or I'll step out. When my door is closed, I'm having quiet time. So having the ability to communicate those things, and that way the other person doesn't feel rejected by you advocating for your own needs because you've communicated quite nicely that it's nothing to do with you. I just need that time. I just need like um my sensory issues to be understood. And so this is what I'm telling you. This one needs to be respected. Okay, emotional boundaries. So these are the limits we set to protect our emotional well-being and recognize where our feelings and responsibilities end and another person's begin. So some sample scripts about those. So I care about you, but I don't have the emotional space for this right now. Or I want to help, but I'm not the right person for this conversation. I need time to think before I respond. So yeah, emotional boundaries can be quite difficult to establish. So having those scripts is quite important because again, it gives you like an understanding of what you can say in those situations. And also, I think the last one there, so I need time to think before I respond. Oftentimes, sometimes we might say yes, but just because we feel we didn't have the processing time. So we said yes and then thought about it and said, I actually do not have time to help my friend with her house renovation because I've got all these other responsibilities. But I said yes because I did it before I could process it. So also feeling comfortable with saying, I need more time to process it. Especially I think over text is quite useful. If someone messages you something, you can think about it for a bit and then text back when you're ready. But things like telephone and in person, it can be quite difficult. So understanding that you can ask for more time is quite useful in that sense because then you can realize whether you truly want to do something or whether it is a case of I don't know if people have heard of like people pleasing or you're scared that the other person is not going to be happy with you for saying no. Understanding like the function of why you want to say yes and whether you have the energy to say yes as well. So yeah, so time and energy boundaries. That ties in quite nicely. Time boundaries. So the limits we set around how we spend our time to protect our well-being, responsibilities, and need for rest. And then energy boundaries, the limits we set to protect our physical, emotional, social energy, helping us to avoid overwhelm and burnout. So you can see how those are quite related. One of them about time, the other about energy, but quite similar in that sense. So sample scripts, I can't reply right now. I'll message you when I have the energy. I need downtime to recharge. Let's talk later. Or I can't commit today. Can we plan for another time? So again, that last one is quite useful because you're not rejecting the person. You're not saying, I don't want to hang out with you. I'm just saying, I can't do this right now, but I'm available tomorrow. And so that clear communication is what builds those relationships and makes it stronger because you're advocating for yourself. You're less likely to feel that resentment. You're less likely to be burnt out or overwhelmed or exhausted, but you're also communicating it quite nicely to the other person so that they go, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, so that's quite a nice one there. Communication boundaries. So these are limits that help us feel comfortable, respected, and understood in the way we communicate with others. So sample scripts like, I'd like a chance to speak to, or this topic is overwhelming, can we talk about something else? I'm not comfortable discussing that. So sometimes with boundaries, we feel like if someone is asking something, we have to respond. Again, it might be to do with that processing where we haven't had enough time to think, actually, I'm feeling really uncomfortable with this topic. So if at any point it's checking in with your body and thinking, what's this topic doing for me? Especially if it's a triggering topic or something of an emotional nature, it's checking in with your body and thinking, actually, either stepping out or saying, I'm not comfortable talking about this. And that's absolutely fine. And people should respect your decision for that as well. Okay, so last type that we'll speak about here is social boundaries. So these are limits about how much social interaction we have, who we spend time with, and the type of social situations we feel comfortable in. So sample scripts like, thanks for inviting me, but I'm skipping this one. Big groups are hard for me, want to hang out one-to-one instead. I'd like to observe rather than join in. Sometimes social situations can be exhausting. I guess that can also be related to the sensory to sensory issues that are related to social situations. So obviously it might be a busy room and with that loud noises, there might be more like physical contact and things like that, a lot of things that you might feel less comfortable with. And so again, it's feeling comfortable, advocating for your needs and saying, actually, I would prefer to hang out one-on-one with you because I know then it's going to be like a quiet night in, we can play board games, something like that, as opposed to going clubbing or going to like a loud environment. That's not for everyone. So it's understanding where your limits lie and where it's actually, this could lead to me being so exhausted the next day that I won't be able to engage in my responsibilities or other activities I had planned for that day. So understanding that and putting things into place to help yourself. Like I said, more about scripts here. So we can use scripts to set boundaries. So setting boundaries can feel quite difficult, particularly if you're feeling anxious about conflict or disappointing others. Again, like we spoke about with the extra time to process conversations, it can be quite difficult to know what to say in that moment. It might be difficult to find the right words in the moment as well. Knowing the exact issue that happened that made you feel uncomfortable as well can be quite difficult. Again, having a history of masking or people pleasing or worried about being understood. So having a prepared script can make communicating your needs feel clearer and more confident. That way you know that if I am in a loud situation, I can say this and this. It reduces the demands, it reduces the processing time, and means that you have something ready for when you do feel uncomfortable, when you do want to advocate for your needs. It's like a little hack when you're first establishing boundaries, because that way you have things ready. And then when you feel more and more comfortable, you might see that actually I don't need a script because I know that loud environments are not for me and I feel comfortable advocating for my needs. But I think at the start, especially with the processing difficulties, especially with potentially years of people pleasing and not being able to establish your boundaries, it's trying to make life a little bit more easier for you to start putting those boundaries in place. Because then afterwards, when you've established those boundaries, it might be the case that feeling good about yourself, advocating for your needs is what's going to make you carry on putting those boundaries in place. But at the start, you need to get the ball rolling a little bit. So here's a simple boundary script. You can adapt this. This is not like the script that you have to use. This is just an example. But you can use this type of structure for like different types of boundaries. So stating the boundary. So I need, and it might be I need space, right? Then briefly explain. You don't necessarily have to, this is optional, because I guess just establishing that boundary is enough. But I think especially when you're first putting boundaries into place, it might be uncomfortable to just say it without giving an explanation. So again, when you first start off, it might be quite helpful to have like an explanation for it. So I need space because I need time to recharge. You can then offer an alternative if you want to as well. That makes it more comfortable. That's that communication again. You're making sure the other person doesn't feel rejected and you're giving them an other alternative to be like, you know what, right now I need space because I need time to recharge. Can we meet next weekend instead? That way, that other person isn't feeling rejected. Um, and they know that actually it's not to do with it's not like an excuse to not hang out, that kind of thing. But again, even just saying I need space is enough. You do not have to make those explanations or offer alternatives if you do not want to, if you do not need to. Because that is a full sentence and that is enough. So example here is I won't be able to come this time because I need some quiet time to recharge. I'd love to catch up another day. And it might be worth sitting down with yourself and making a template of a couple boundary scripts for different types of boundaries. So in this webinar, we spoke about 5 different boundaries, but it might be the case that actually you want to do some more research, look at some other boundaries, and you have like a kind of like a boundary script cheat sheet, if you will, where you have like specific scripts for different situations. And don't overwhelm yourself with making too many scripts, just very basic ones to start off with. And then when you feel more comfortable, you might be able to adapt them, or you might be able to feel more comfortable just setting boundaries without those scripts. Okay. So yeah, remember, you do not have to justify every boundary, like I said, just saying I need space is enough. It is okay to keep your explanation short. Your needs are valid, even if someone does not understand them. So if you do establish your boundaries with someone and you say, I need space, I need time to recharge, and they do not respect your boundaries, that is not a reflection of you, that's a reflection on them. Some people will not like it when you do finally start to establish those boundaries because they're not used to it. And then I guess reacting accordingly to their behavior, whether that's making the friendship, like putting distance between the friendship or relationship, or whether it's, you know, sticking closely with those boundaries, because once they see that this boundary is, you know, stable and it's consistent and it stays, they might then become more lenient and they might respect those boundaries. But at the start, people will try to push your boundaries. So remembering that as well. Okay. So I thought we could look at some scenarios as well. So I've got 4 scenarios here, different types of situations that you might want to set boundaries in, just to kind of work through it so you can see how it works in real time. So, okay, first scenario is the constant messaging friend. So in this context, a friend sends frequent messages and expects immediate replies. So I guess your goal is to practice setting time or energy boundaries without that guilt. And the challenge here is obviously fear of disappointing someone or being misunderstood. You don't want the other person to feel upset that you don't want to message them all the time. And some sample scripts there. So I like talking with you, but I can't reply quickly. I'll respond when I have the energy, or I'm not available to chat right now. I'll message you later today, especially if we do have responsibilities like work responsibilities or looking after children or other timely activities. We can't constantly be on our phones, and so it's important to set that boundary and say, actually, I do not have the time or energy to respond right now. I will respond when I do have the time or energy. Yeah, so that's the first scenario. Second scenario, so this is sorry. So partner wanting more time. Don't know what happened here. Sorry. Partner wanting more time together. So the context here is a partner wants more closeness or time than you can comfortably give. And then the goal is practicing balancing connection with personal space. Obviously, that challenge is that worry that needing space will be taken personally. So we don't want the other person to think, actually, I'm distancing myself from you. It's more of a case of I need to recharge my batteries so I can be there for you. Yeah, so sample script, I care about you and I also need but I also need downtime to recharge. Can we plan time together on Saturday? Or I'm feeling overloaded. I want to connect, but I need quiet evening first. So again, that communication is really important there because you're signaling to your partner, I do care about you and I do want to hang out with you. I do want that quality time, but I do need the energy to be able to do that. And that way you can see how you're reducing again that rejection of the other person. They're going to understand and they're going to take it less personally. Yeah. Okay. Um, okay, so role play scenario number 3. So a co-worker who overshares. So the context here is a co-worker frequently shares personal and emotional details during work hours. So the goal here would be practicing conversational boundaries in a professional setting. And the challenge, I guess, it's navigating politeness, masking, or workplace expectations. So especially when it's at work, it can be a bit daunting to establish those boundaries because we're scared that it's going to signify something about our work ethic or like how, yeah, things like that. So sample scripts. I hope things get better for you. I need to stay focused on work right now. Well, I'm not the right person for this conversation. Maybe HR or a friend could support you. So again, I guess this is communication boundaries, but also emotional boundaries. So we cannot always be there for people and it might be a triggering topic. So saying things like, I want to be there for you, but this is a triggering topic for me, or I don't have the time to talk about this right now, and telling them, I guess, where to go to find that support as well. I guess this one's quite a difficult one, and that one might take quite a bit of getting used to get to that stage. Role play number 4, so family member ignoring your sensory needs. So again, sensory boundary there. Context is a family member plays loud music, hugs without asking, or dismisses sensory overwhelm. So the practice, physical and sensory boundaries, the challenge is family dynamics, guilt, or being told you're too sensitive. But it's advocating for your needs. Again, it's making other people understand that actually this is not something I'm trying to be difficult about. This is not something I'm trying to be sensitive about. This is something that does really affect me. And these sensory issues, like highlighting what those sensory issues are for you and why it's important for them to be respected. And when you can see that other people respect your sensory boundaries, that's when, again, the relationship is going to get more positive and more healthy. So, loud music is painful for me. Please turn it down or I'll need to step out. I don't want hugs right now. A wave or smile works better for me. So, yeah, those were the 4 scenarios. Obviously, there's more different types of situations, but just to get like a taste of different types of boundaries and where you'd set boundaries. So it's not always with friends. And it might be the case that there are some boundaries that we find easier to set and other boundaries that are harder to set. So understanding who your safe people are, you can always practice those boundaries with your safe people first. So people that you feel safe to unmask with and be your authentic self with, it might be the case that you tell them, I'm practicing boundaries throughout this week. So can I practice with you, that kind of thing. And once you become comfortable with people, like your safe people, you might become more and more comfortable to do with people that you feel less comfortable with, but not kind of jumping in the deep end because that can be really scary and quite overwhelming as well. Okay. Oftentimes as well, so recognizing boundary violations, oftentimes people are find it hard to understand when their boundaries are violated. I think because if you haven't advocated for your needs, you haven't established those boundaries, it might be difficult to know what can I tolerate, what's something that I'm like, you know what, I would prefer not to hang out today, but actually it doesn't make that much of a issue for me tomorrow. Compared to if I do hang out today, it makes like a really big issue tomorrow. So it's understanding where to draw that line. So recognizing boundary violations, I guess a lot of it does come down to practice and trying to identify situations where it's like, actually, what did my emotions tell me afterwards? That's one thing. And also kind of being like, trying to find patterns. So if every single time you say yes to going to the cinema, the next day you're feeling exhausted, or the next day you're feeling that resentment, it's understanding that actually maybe me saying yes to the cinema is a boundary violation, and it's something I need to work on setting those boundaries so that I do not feel exhausted or resentment the next day. Yeah, some more on that. So boundary map. So you can use a boundary map to identify what feels safe and comfortable, what is situational or dependent on context, and what is uncomfortable or not okay. So this boundary map can change over time depending on energy, stress, and life circumstances. It can help you understand your needs, recognize your limits, and communicate your boundaries more clearly. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is kind of like an example. So you might have like green, amber, red, and you might do it as like a table, or you might choose to do it as like a Venn diagram, or you might do it like when you're journaling, kind of try to identify things that you put into either zone. So green, again, comfortable and safe. So example might be trusted friends, preferred routines, like and stick to similar routines. Amber kind of depends on the situation. So it might be that social events or taking phone calls or physical contact might be very dependent on how you are feeling, your emotional state at the time, whether you are already overwhelmed. Because if you are overwhelmed, it might be that actually receiving a phone call or having to make a phone call is what's going to be quite difficult in that moment. But if you're not overwhelmed, it might be in the green zone and you might be able to make those phone calls no problem. Red is not okay under any circumstance. So there might be specific things that you're like, I absolutely dislike physical contact under any context. Please do not touch me, or please, I don't want hugs. And understanding those red and amber zones, and when amber turns into red as well, because that's quite easy. So where amber depends on the situation, it might be that actually you can quite easily go from a phone call that usually feels okay, but when you are feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling that sensory overwhelm as well, it might turn, the calls might turn into red quite easily. So it's understanding how to set those boundaries so you don't fall into red so much. Yeah, so a boundary map is not fixed. It can shift depending on burnout, sensory load, or emotional capacity. So this is like a work in progress if you think of it that way. It can change over time. Yeah, so it's not stable as such. And it might be that in specific context or with specific people, you have different boundaries. So it is very much understanding and learning, constant learning what these boundaries mean to you, how you can establish boundaries that work for you, and that make your relationships just that bit more positive. Another way of understanding boundary violations is focusing on values. So I mentioned them a bit earlier, but values are things that are most important to you. So they guide your decisions, relationships, and the way that you want to live your life. So things like respect, honesty, independence, safety, kindness, identifying what is important to you and then making sure that your boundaries align with it. When your boundaries align, that's when it will feel it'll feel easier to have those boundaries, because you know actually I'm an honest person, or like honesty is important to me. So this means that when someone is lying, it's setting that boundary, or it means that when someone is asking me for my opinion on something, it's making sure that I'm honest about it. So living with your boundaries aligned with your values means that you won't feel that sense of did I do the right thing? Like, should I have set my boundary? You start to question it less because you're like, no, because I have confirmation from my values that they align. So an example of this, so if you were to search up, there's loads on Google, core values list, and there will be this massive Word document or like PDF with loads of values. The task that I would suggest is looking at these values and ticking off the values until you have top 5 values. Again, values can change over time. So it might be worth coming back to those and thinking, have they changed every like 6 months, and reviewing your values. But utilizing those values to help yourself to establish those better boundaries. And so those are your top 5 values, and kind of making decisions, putting boundaries in place, doing everything in line with those values. I think that's quite a useful task. Yeah. So again, ask yourself, what is important to me? What helps me feel respected and safe? What boundary could help protect what matters most to me? Asking those, like, kind of, you can use it as like a journal prompt. Yeah, and that way you question less whether you did the right thing. So with rest, as if rest is a value for you, a possible boundary might be, I need 1 day each weekend with no plans. Or respect, I won't continue a conversation if I'm being shouted at. That is quite a good script there. You can use that in a lot of contexts. Well-being, so I'm leaving now because I'm feeling overwhelmed. Put in your needs first, because that way you won't feel that resentment, and the next day you won't feel so exhausted because you knew, actually, I'm feeling my social battery draining. I need to go now. And again, the more comfortable you feel, the more likely you are to set those boundaries. Honesty, again, I'd appreciate direct and clear communication. So, yeah, that's how values work. So, boundaries help protect your values. They are kind of the vessel to protect your values in that sense. Okay. I thought what we'd do as well is just kind of look at some green and red flags for different types of relationships. So I think I focused on 4 here. So some green flags for friendships. So they respect your boundaries. It's balanced communication, shared effort. You feel like you can have those comfortable silences. When we feel like we can be our authentic selves and we can unmask, we feel more comfortable with silence. We can sit in the same room, coexist. We don't have to talk. We can just do our own tasks. And that's a very big green flag in friendships, I guess. Friendship red flags, I guess it's guilt tripping, over dependence, ignoring sensory needs, one-sided. So when you do try to set those boundaries, if they're guilt tripping you into doing what they wanted, that's a red flag. And it is picking up on that and thinking, actually, me setting the boundary was not the problem here, but I'm getting guilt tripped. So identifying those red flags is quite important there. And obviously one-sided, we don't want one-sided friendships. We don't want to feel like every single time they suggest something, I have to go along with it. But when I suggest let's go on a walk, they always say no. You want someone that can, it doesn't always have to be 50-50. Sometimes it is 60-40 in relationships, but you want someone that is going to be there for you when you need them. Romantic green flags. So again, clear communication, emotional safety, respect autonomy, consent culture. When you say no, it means no. It's not trying to force you into saying yes, it's not trying to convince you that actually it would be better to say yes to something. Red flags, love bombing, boundary pushing, sensory invalidation, controlling behavior. So I don't know if people understand the term love bombing, but I guess it's early on in a relationship when someone says all the nicest things to you, but it's too early to be saying all those nice things because you haven't built up that intimacy. It's a way of kind of making you feel special. I'm not saying people aren't special, but this person doesn't know you well enough to be saying the types of things that they are saying. And it's trying to get you to become more vulnerable, and then that can be used against you in certain contexts. So it's identifying that actually this is not the normal timeline to be saying that, you want to get married with me. Like first week into a relationship, identifying things like that. Boundary pushing as well. I guess that's probably shared with a lot of the different types of relationships. Anybody that pushes your boundaries, it's a bit of a red flag, and it might be the case that they're not used to it, and that's fine. And the more you set those boundaries, the more they're like, okay, I understand it now because you've communicated it. But if it constantly happens and that you feel invalidated in your feelings, that is a red flag, and that needs to be brought up. Yeah, family green flag. So people accepting your neurodivergence, predictable communication, respecting independence. So predictable communication, you know what you're going to expect. You don't have to be scared of what will and won't happen, whether things are going to change. Family red flags, so dismissiveness, boundary violations, emotional manipulation, rigid expectations. So you don't want someone to put expectations on you that you cannot fulfill. I think living life with particular expectations in mind can be quite difficult. And it's not what should be expected of you, it's what feels right for you in that sense. So that can be a big red flag because we shouldn't live with other people's expectations in mind, especially people should be mindful of the neurodivergent challenges that you may be facing, and you will find it difficult to live up to the expectations of neurotypical people. So I guess dismissiveness and boundary violation and the rigid expectations really doesn't help in that context. Final one, so workplace green flags, so clear expectations, respect processing times, professional boundaries. Yeah, having things written down as well. So oftentimes people will say verbal communication can be quite difficult, especially with long lists at work. So having things written down after meetings or before meetings so you can read over it, so you can say, actually, these are the things I need to do, so you don't feel like you're behind on the work because you have it all written down. So red flags, that's task dumping, masking pressure, inconsistent communication or hostility to needs. You can see how if your routine is constantly being changed or inconsistently being communicated things and things are expected of you, but you weren't communicated it, that can lead to a lot of stress. And that can be quite difficult to maintain those relationships, and that can lead to burnout, that can lead to resentment, exhaustion, all of that. And understanding that actually there are times when to set those boundaries. I think this will be quite useful for the next webinar on reasonable adjustments in workplace settings. So this might be brought up a bit more in that webinar if anybody signed up to that or wants to sign up. Another bit about self-compassion. So, for many neurodivergent people, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, especially if you've learned to prioritize other needs or to avoid conflict. So having that self-compassion helps reduce the pressure to get perfect. Instead of criticizing yourself for finding it hard, you can recognize that you're learning a new skill and that your needs still matter even when it feels difficult to express them. I guess remembering as well, how would you speak to a friend who's struggling to set a boundary? You probably would be less critical of them and you'd be more understanding, and it's trying to bring that same energy to yourself. You're learning a new skill, it's different, it's new, it's not going to be perfect, it's not a linear journey. It goes up and down. It might be that some people you can set all your boundaries with, and you're like, I've set so many boundaries with this person, but with people that you feel less safe with, it might be more difficult. And it's understanding that actually that doesn't mean you're not progressing. It just means that like it's something to work on. And it's, I guess, sitting with it and thinking you're not back at square one if you didn't say no to something that you feel like you should have, which is difficult, but it is possible. Yeah, so boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are guidelines that help us feel safe, respected, and connected in relationships. Okay, that's everything on the relationships and boundaries. Like I said, if you have any questions, you can contact me directly on my email there. A couple questions that we had in the live webinar. So I guess this is more of a comment actually. Someone said that sometimes they find it easier to use different types of communication to establish boundaries. So if they find it difficult to communicate something in person, they might use the text function. So they might text someone, or they might, I think this was specific to workplace, like message someone on Teams, like a safe person on Teams, to then advocate for your needs. So that's something you can definitely do with boundaries. If you don't feel comfortable, it's telling your safe person, I don't feel comfortable right now, and then leaving the room. You don't have to tell the whole room that you feel uncomfortable. That can be quite scary when you first set boundaries. So if you are in a social situation and it becomes really overwhelming and you can feel that you're getting quite anxious, or that you might feel exhausted, it's someone that you feel close to saying, I need to step out for a moment. You don't have to get the mic and tell everybody. You can use that safe person as a means to, if anybody asks, oh, they just needed a bit of fresh air. And then when you feel more comfortable, it might be telling other people as well. That person can advocate for you. So if you wanted to, if you struggled with the boundaries, it could be that you tell that person and they say, my friend just told me that they don't feel comfortable with this and this. And so having someone speak up for you might be quite useful in the early stages. There was also some talk about understanding when your boundaries are then too rigid. Like, am I, by trying to say, I really want to eat burgers and chips today, by saying that in like a very like direct tone, how do I know that the other person is not saying yes to me because I was so confident about it? But I guess the whole premise of that and the whole idea of that is that through open communication and through communicating it, you're giving them the opportunity to say, actually, I would prefer pizza. So you establishing the boundaries is not necessarily the problem there, because they have the opportunity to say, I don't want that. And so in a way, it's that communication on both sides that helps build those boundaries and healthier relationships. Um, yeah. Trying to think any other questions. Yeah, I guess it's just remembering that it's a process. It's not perfect. You will get there. Trying to use those scripts while you can, and then when you feel more comfortable, you can adjust those scripts. And yeah, I guess that is everything from me. I think. Yeah, so the next one is employment reasonable adjustments. I think that is the live one, and the recorded version should be uploaded quite soon after that. If you do have any questions, don't be afraid to email or contact. Yeah, thank you.